when I used luminol for the first time, and this was back in 1978, and I think they had never seen it being done. And so then I heard him going, well, I'm going to call you to all my crime scenes. So I thought, oh my God, I thought, well, that's a great compliment. And then I realized I'd be too busy. My first opportunity with that was with the television show CSI, Crime Scene Investigations, the Vegas, the Vegas episodes. And I did have a consultation on Miami. They wanted to do an episode of bloodstain pattern analysis in space.
The city keeps its secrets, but nothing hides forever. This is the evidence trail. I've seen enough crime scenes to know one thing: people lie, but evidence can lead to the truth. And my partner, Chris G., knows how to read it. Each episode, we open the file, trace the facts, and let the science speak. So watch your step. Once you're on the evidence trail, the truth is coming for you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Evidence Trail podcast. If you're joining us for your first time, welcome. If you're a ongoing subscriber, then thank you for popping along again. Today, I'm joined by Greg Laskowski, President of Criminalistics Services International, a retired criminalist, forensic science educator, and consultant with nearly 4 decades of experience in forensic science and law enforcement. Throughout his career, Greg has worked on countless crime scene investigations, specializing in areas including bloodstain pattern analysis, firearms examinations, and tool mark comparisons. He's also helped bring forensic science to mainstream audiences through his advisory work on hit television shows including Bones, Law and Order, and Numbers. Greg, thanks for joining me.
It's great to be here. Great to be with you.
I'm hoping that bio you can relate to, and I've got the right bio for the right guest. That would be embarrassing if I didn't.
It sounded like me.
That's good. We're off to a good start. Okay, so let's start with basically what sparked your interest in forensic science, and was there a particular moment when you realized it was the career that you wanted to pursue?
I could answer yes to those questions. The first probably was in when I was young and watching movies on television, was the old Sherlock Holmes series with Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce. Although it wasn't necessarily true to the book, because Nigel Bruce played Dr. Watson. He was a little more of a bumbler, and we know Watson really wasn't that. But those were entertaining, and the use of rudimentary forensic science to solve clues was captured my interest. I think the real impetus for my forensic science career was the television hit show Quincy, which starred Jack Klugman as the medical examiner in Los Angeles. And so that really got me going. But eventually it was my father that introduced me to forensic science. I had finished my bachelor degree in biochemistry, and I was looking forward to returning back to the university, pursuing my master's or PhD in biochemistry. And my father said, well, take a break this summer and assist me. He was a professor of geochemistry, geology at the local university, and he told me about some ongoing project that he had involving collecting soil samples from around Kern County for the sheriff's department, so that they could map soils and see if a body had been buried somewhere, moved, and transferred. So it intrigued me. Well, I ended up joining the lab that summer with a specific title, assistant criminalist. And when they found out I had a degree that had chemistry background, they asked me. I ended up not collecting soil samples, but I ended up at first driving around Kern County, which is a relatively large county, calibrating the breath instruments. That was the old breathalyzer. So I'd drive around the county 2 days a week and calibrate that. And then I was working in the lab one day, and My boss was called to a homicide, and then they brought back this evidence. And I mean, it was a stinky, reeky, horrible homicide. Guy had died, was shot in a camper, and it was left there in 100-degree temperatures as Fahrenheit for those of you. And so it just intrigued me, and I thought, well, this is something I think I want to do. And so then when I kept looking at pre-doc or post-doc jobs in biochemistry at that salary and the salary I could make as a criminalist with overtime, I think that got me. It hooked me.
And you've also got that kind of intrigue of being that Sherlock Holmes kind of detective, haven't you? And solving things piece by piece. I'm very pleased as well, Greg, that you've chosen a British detective to base your career on and spar on from that.
No, I'm not. I'm not into the Belgian fellow.
Okay, so that sounds like early days. My next question was going to be walk us through your journey into forensic science. I think you've already done that. And what you were doing before you entered the field. So you said you were calibrating like the breathalyzers. These are good stories, I think, for people considering getting into forensic science, because even now I'd say a degree just isn't enough. You need to have this kind of experience, no matter what it is. So if it is in law enforcement, it is experience you're gaining. Would you tend to concur with that?
I would, because back in the day, or my time, and I don't think it's as true today, most criminalists, at least in California and probably throughout the United States, started out working and analyzing breath and blood and urine samples for alcohol, for driving under the influence cases. And of course, they would then cut their teeth in court as expert witnesses on driving under the influence and the effects of alcohol on the human body. And so that's where you would start. And then you would probably transfer over to the toxicology section if the laboratory was large, did that. And you would analyze urine and blood samples for various drugs of abuse. And then maybe they would transfer you to we called it the drug section, but it's the controlled substances analysis section. So you cut your teeth, starting with marijuana, identifying that, and then moving on to the harder drugs. So, yeah, that's at least I was in what I call a smaller lab. So my experience was varied. I had a variety of case work that I was assigned to.
Yeah, fantastic. It's good that this is a podcast and not a radio show as well, I think, because if anyone tuned in, just as you said, my best advice is to start on, like the lesser drugs and move on to the harder drugs. They'd wonder what you were talking about, I think. That's not advice that neither of us recommend.
No, because early on, I had I call it a privilege. The boss says, we were doing a microcrystalline analysis at that time. And so he handed me a large jar of Mexican brown heroin and says, here's a paper on analogs of opioids. Could you follow this paper and manufacture some dipropanyl morphine or what have you? And so that was what I cut my teeth on, was actually manufacturing analogs to hard narcotics and then using microcrystalline tests to show that the efficacy of the tests, that we could identify and distinguish and discriminate between different analogs and isotopes and such.
Yeah.
Or isomers, rather.
Fascinating. And it's great, isn't it, to be able to do things that would normally be illegal, but when you've got a reason to do it, it makes it, a lot.
Well, who would turn down the ability to, shoot guns, blow things up, and set fires to things and get paid for it?
Exactly. It's like every little boy's dream, really, isn't it? Oh dear. So what was the first forensic role you landed? Would it have been the toxicology side of things? Because we're probably talking back then DNA. Oh goodness, what year did DNA come in? Was that
the early 90s. So I began in late 70s. So that was just when we were doing antigen antibody testing, and then the multiplex systems for the blood enzymes were coming into fashion.
That's right.
And then we had there was the great battle between starch wars and the cellulose acid membrane electrophoresis people. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So you've early in your career, you received a commendation related to a fatal crime scene investigation. What can you tell us about that experience, and what did it teach you as a young professional?
well, it taught me that at least where I began, it was one of my first crime scenes, and so I asked the my lab director, my boss. I said, "Well, are you going to come with me?" He says, "No." He says, "No, you go out there." I said, "Well, what am I going to do?" He says, "Well, just don't fuck it up." And and that was the way it was back then. And it was a different culture back then because I was a civilian employee for the sheriff's department. And my first day on the job, after I got hired as a criminalist, my boss took me down to the basement there where we could have coffee and the jail prepared food for the employees. And I was sitting and having coffee with him, and he goes, "Now, Greg," he says, "I want you to know two things. There are two type of people that work in the sheriff's department. There are those that are sworn and those that are assholes, and we're not sworn." So, so so I had a real eye-opening experience so that when
Yeah.
I did respond to my first crime scene, I had my little kits with me and we wore suit and tie back then to
Wow.
respond to scenes. And I responded to the scene with the kits and the barrier tape was up and the news cameras were going. And as I was walking into the scene, I heard the lead sergeant detective say, "Here comes the college boy."
Oh.
So so I I was baptized by fire. But the case happened to be it was a fire case where two young children died as a result of being burned in the fire. The mother had left to go shopping or actually go meet up with some boyfriends or something. She left these two young children in the house, and they couldn't figure out what had caused the fire. And so after a really massive and incredibly tough search, sifting through the rubble and the ash and the charred material, I found that the mother had left the ironing the iron on, and that boys were playing or something, had tipped over, iron landed on top of the wooden iron board, and then basically started a fire. And
Wow.
that's what so that's where I received my first commendation.
Yeah. And I think that comment about, like, the college boy, because 'cause I've had this before, when you're young and everything, you're first starting out, it almost gives you more drive and more incentive, than it, to prove those people wrong. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, yes. Well, especially with that particular sergeant, when I'd pointed out that there were some bloody tracks, and that I asked to look at the bottom of his shoes, and he had stepped into the blood.
Mm.
And then when I used luminol for the first time, and this was back in 1978, and I think
Mm.
they had never seen it being done. And so then I heard him going, "Well, I'm gonna call you to all my crime scenes." So I thought, "Oh my god." I thought, "Well, that's a great compliment." And then I realized I'd be too busy. I
Yeah.
didn't wanna go to him.
Yeah. And I'm sure you wanted to have a life outside of work as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think what fascinates me about forensic science is that, everyone looks at the advancements and where we've come and how it's progressed, but yet some things just stay the same. Like you say, luminol, we're still using it now. The fire investigation techniques, we're still sifting through debris, getting down to that bottom layer and finding out the cause. Your fingerprint powders, still using aluminium powder. So yeah, there's some things that just don't change, and I think people forget that as well.
Oh, yeah, the classic techniques are still in force, still
Yeah,
used.
yeah. So how did it feel for you, Greg, when your boss said, "You're off by yourself, you're off on your own"? Do you remember those feelings that you had?
Oh, oh, yeah, I was scared to I was
Yeah.
scared. I I thought, "You're gonna just, toss me into the lake, and then I have to learn to swim."
Yeah.
And especially when I pulled up in the car and then walked out and I see the tape and the news cameras, and it's like, "Oh my god, now it's all gonna be on film," there
Yeah.
goes my career if I mess up.
Yeah. But I think what I try to say to people to calm their nerves, and if I could go back to, like a younger me and just be, like tap on the shoulder and everything, it's like the circumstances and the crime scenes will change. You're going to different environments and things, but the techniques that you will use and everything will stay the same. And you got a whole arsenal of tools in your head that we use at these scenes. So yeah, don't forget about all that. And I think worst case scenario, there is always someone on the other end of the phone. I probably would have chosen someone other than your boss if he has just tossed you in, you know?
Unfortunately, there wasn't anyone else.
Oh, goodness. Oh, dear. Do you remember, say, having a debrief after that scene? As in sitting down with someone and talking about it?
No, I didn't. I think I brought all the evidence back that I had collected, booked it into the property room, began the report process, and then I think my boss had come to me a day or 2 later, and he says, "Yeah, I heard you did good out there." So
Mm.
that at least, buoyed my spirits, and,
Yeah.
I knew that I think I had the startings of a career.
Yeah. No, definitely. Were the 2 children there as well at the time, or had they been recovered before you'd arrived?
Oh, yes, yes, the scene had been let's just call it cold.
Yeah.
The bodies had been removed. I think the arson investigators had gone through the scene a day or 2 earlier, and so the lieutenant, at that time of the investigations unit said, "We need to get this solved." I think it was because it was 2 small twins, boys
Mm.
that died as a
Mm.
result.
I see. And the arson investigators had been in beforehand. Had they not been
Yes.
able to determine the cause?
No, they hadn't, and that was the funny thing because, the fire department handled those type of investigations, the sheriff's
Mm.
department really didn't, but after I had worked that case, I thought, that would be some hard feelings, but actually, no,
Mm.
they had a profound, respect for what I did, and, we had good relations from then on.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. I'm sure they wanted to call you to all their scenes as well. You got the sheriff's department and the fire department wanted you.
No, no, I was just happy later on just receiving the paint cans full of burned debris and
Yeah,
searching for flammables.
yeah. Oh, that is the worst, isn't it? When you come across a paint can in a fire debris and you probably just got some fresh new tools and you think, well, they're not going to be fresh and new anymore. So, throughout your career, you've worked on countless investigations. Is there one case that really stands out to you, perhaps one that later became the subject of a documentary, and what made it so memorable for you?
I think the main case it was called the David Rogers case. In fact, there were 2, documentaries made, one through Forensic Files and one through Sky, the British television. That
I
was
see.
called, I think, When Cops Kill or something of that nature,
Yeah.
and it was a sheriff's deputy that was, killing prostitutes in the county. And the interesting part about that was a body was recovered in a canal. She was decomposed, but they were able to recover 2 spent bullets from the body. And I looked at them and I could determine that the bullets, even despite the decomposition of body, the bullets were in good enough shape to identify it as having been fired from the same firearm, but we didn't have a firearm. And then almost a year to the day, another body's found in the canal, irrigation canal. It too had bullet holes in it, but this scene she was fresher. There were tire tracks at the scene, there were shoe tracks at the scene, and blood spatter at the scene, or blood spatter, and recovered 2 bullets. I looked at the bullets and said, "Wow, these bullets look similar to the ones I had previously looked at." So I grabbed those bullets and sure enough was able to determine that they were fired from the same firearm. And then as luck would have it, we had something called the FBI General Rifling Characteristics Database. I searched that, and based on also the appearance of the bullets, I determined that it was fired from a short-barreled revolver and probably a Colt. And it wasn't too long after that I said, and these are law enforcement rounds. I remember the bullets were semi-jacketed hollow points. They were extremely lightweight. They were 110 grains as opposed to the usual heavier ones that the sheriff's department would use. And through the investigation, and I tell you, those detectives worked hard, but they came up with a suspect, and he was the sheriff's deputy, and that deputy was assisting in the investigation of the case. But we got it.
Yeah. Fantastic. I bet just hearing that he was a sheriff's detective for the first time when you get that suspect identification, that must have, made your gut sort of turn over really, I'd imagine.
It did, because right after that, I remember that one night I was at home and got a call from the captain, the homicide division. He says, "I want you to come to the sheriff's department. We're having a briefing." And it was 11:30 at night when I got this call. So I drove to the sheriff, and there was the top brass of the sheriff's department and the district attorney's office. And they said, "Well," he says, "we think we have somebody, but we want to be sure. So could you go to the lab and bring the large one-to-one photographs of the tire tracks with you?" And I said, "Yeah, I have them with me." And he says, "Good, because we're going to go out to a site, and it's going to be middle of the night, and you need to be as stealthy as possible. We don't want to disturb anybody. And so we want you to look at this one vehicle, bring your photographs, and see if you can match the tires." I said, "Well, that's gonna be difficult to do."
Mm.
But so there I was with my Streamlight flashlight crawling under this pickup truck and with my one-to-one photographs trying to line them up. Fortunately, the front tires were different from the back tires, and that was reflected in the photographs. I said, "Well, I can't tell you this right now at this point that this is the vehicle, but everything indicates that the tires are consistent with wear and tread pattern design and location. So I would say this is a good chance this is the car." And then the next day they arrested the fellow, and he went in for his interview, and he was a cocky guy, and he was sitting in the interview room like, "Oh, hey buddies, what are you bothering me?" And he puts his feet on top of the desk, and the investigator's looking and goes, "Oh my gosh, those are the shoes
Oh, no.
from the canal scene." And then he looked down close and he saw little bits of blood on
Oh,
on the
no.
shoes, and so they turned the shoes over to me, and then we conducted the search warrant on his house and recovered the gun.
Oh, blimey. You'd think to wear different shoes, wouldn't you? But I guess, there is training to be a police officer, but there's no training to be a criminal really, is there?
No, no.
So you mentioned about comparing bullets and making those comparisons and like with the tire marks as well, taking photographs, one-to-one photographs of the tire marks and then comparing them to, the impressions that were found at the scene. One-to-one for the listeners, this is, like your exact scale. So, you are creating a replica that is the exact size of what you've got. But could you sort of talk to the listeners about the kind of techniques that you would use to match these kind of forensic evidences to what you'd find at the scene?
Sure. I wasn't at the initial scenes, both scenes when they were investigated, but the sheriff's department had what we call technical investigators, and these people go out, they photograph the scene, they'll dust for prints, and then they'll collect evidence or bag it, what we call bag and tag.
Mhm.
And they did take one-to-one photographs using a tripod technique with a ruler, and they took serial pictures of the tire tracks as they could and the shoe tracks, and with a ruler, with the proper orientation and the flash to the side, multiple flash settings and such. And so then they printed up these one-to-one photographs. So you have to imagine that this is probably a 12 by 17 size photograph, and of course it was in black and white back in
Mm.
those times. And one of the things that we decided to do was, because it was in this soft, powdery soil, we decided to roll the suspect vehicle in the same type of powdery soil, and then photograph those and do our comparison, one-to-one comparisons, side by
Mm.
side or with overlays that way. The shoe tracks, on the other hand, we used something we called a comparator box, and it was just a wooden tray filled with fingerprint powder, fine modeling clay, and comic cleanser to keep it from clumping. And so we would impress that shoe track or then that shoe sole into that comparator box and photograph again using side lighting and to mimic what we had from the crime scene photographs. And
Yeah.
so we would do that.
Yeah. And I guess, just one piece of this evidence by itself may not be conclusive. So, if you've got like say a tire track or something like that, you think there are many different, like similar tires out there, same models and things, but then you think it's a bit of a coincidence if you have the tire tracks, the footwear marks, the gun casings, and all things like this that are all the same. It then stops becoming a coincidence, doesn't it, really?
It does. With the tire tracks, the shoe tracks, of course, and having the bloodstain spatter on his
Mm.
on the shoe uppers, they were able to do at that time. That was enzyme testing, because it was around 1988, and so that was pre DNA, and of course the firearms evidence was just what sunk him.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is before DNA. So you'd be able to, determine someone's blood group, perhaps?
Right. It was we used the enzyme multi-system, so you could probably get, I think back time, the 1 in 30,000
I see.
was a pretty significant
Yeah.
likelihood.
Yeah. But I think for a defense barrister, that's enough for them for a little bit of wiggle room, isn't it? We know
Yeah.
what they're like. So they took that, was that Sky that took that onto a documentary?
First it was Forensic Files. It was an episode called A Leg Up on Crime.
Yeah.
And they air that on headline news. I mean, people tell me, "Hey, I saw you on television last night." Or, what are you doing at 2 a.m. watching me? You need to get a life or something.
Oh dear.
In fact, that was one of the funny stories. I was at an American Academy Forensic Science Conference in Baltimore, and I was stepping off the elevator, and this guy, he's in a suit and tie, and he's, "Oh my God, I just saw you on TV." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm Agent so and so with the FBI." And I said, "Oh, well, nice to meet you." He goes, I said, "What were you watching me on TV?" He says, "Oh, I got in late and I turned on the television and you were on." And I said, "Well, like I said, you have to get a light."
I didn't know that many people were up at that time in the morning, but I guess in law enforcement, everyone's always awake, really, aren't they?
Yes, I get with flights and such to these meetings,
Yeah.
cross
Oh
country.
dear.
When the flames are gone, the search for answers begins. Prometheus Forensic Services are independent specialists in fire and explosion investigation, delivering clear court-ready evidence across the UK and internationally. They hold ISO 9001 certification for fire investigation, a mark of quality you can trust. Prometheus also delivers specialist training courses for police, fire service, and independent investigators, from introductory programs through to advanced fatal fire investigation. Find out more at www.prometheus-fs.co.uk. Prometheus Forensic Services, revealing the truth behind the fire.
What do you feel may be the biggest misconception the public has about forensic science?
Well, I think it's the new misconception is I think the public is being sold a bill of goods that some of what we do is voodoo. It's not true science anymore. It's come to my attention that there's people lecturing on cruise ships now about junk, forensic science being junk science or voodoo science, and that is just, I think, getting into the mainstream, and there's very little effort on our parts as forensic scientists to debunk the debunkers. I think we just let it go by, but it's just creeping in there because I think it's going to be mischaracterized as what we do and what we can do and what the evidence truly says.
Definitely. That's a worry, isn't it? That you think if people believe this person and they feel like forensic science is a debunked science, so we need to go and open the jail cells of all these people that have been convicted through forensic science. Okay, with the caveat, there has been a few miscarriages of justice in the past, and there probably will be in the future. But there's going to be a lot of cases that have been solved by forensic science, and there'll be a lot of families that would have something to say about these debunkers, wouldn't they? So,
Yeah, well, the other issue is as well is, not every case is going to have DNA and fingerprints, and that's not going to be required. It shouldn't be a requirement for a jury to sit, listen, and hear the evidence as they should.
no, because I was chatting to Mark Spencer. He's a forensic botanist that we have over in the UK, and he'd solved a murder based on, like botany. It was a particular leaf that was only found in this certain environment where a body was left, and that was caught on someone's car, I believe. And it's sciences like that that would just get overlooked. Like you say, it would just be people are interested in fingerprints and DNA because, that can tell you the who. But is that enough for a conviction? And I think people are perhaps forgetting that just a fingerprint alone or DNA alone certainly may not just be all you need for a conviction. You may need this other evidence, like you've gone into detail about getting a footwear mark, getting a tire mark, blood on the shoe. I think most people would think, oh, blood on the shoe. Yeah, that's conclusive. But how did that blood get there? I think people are forgetting about that. The how did it get there could be challenged in court. So, yeah, I think people forget that forensic science just isn't about the DNA and fingerprints that will give you instant answers.
Well, people forget that, soils play a part. One can use, well, one of the old cases I had was a farm worker took a young boy out into a vineyard, molested him, smothered him in the soft soil, and then returned to this party. Then he became part of the search party. And later on, when through the investigations, my and this was my boss investigated the initial stages of the scene. Particularly, the suspect took swabbings of the suspect's penis, which happened to be uncircumcised, as he was a foreign farm worker, and collected soil samples. And my father was one of the scientists called in consultation, and he was able to show that this farm worker, the soil that was, came from that vineyard because of the alluvial deposits of that soil, as opposed to where he supposedly worked driving a tractor at another area of the farm. And of course, he did some oddball experiment where he was able to show that, the defense argued that, well, he was driving this tractor and hence the soil, these fine particles penetrated or through the fabric of his denim jeans and his underpants and got on his penis. And my father was able to show, no, these soil particle sizes and the makeup indicated, direct contact with the soil itself. And so that's a technique there. Or plant material, as you said, or bug parts on a radiator, where we had a fellow drive all the way cross country, but we were able to show that the bugs on the radiator of his rental car indicate that he was in California with the typical carcasses. And they didn't even have all the full bug, but carcasses, portions of it.
Wow.
So so it's very important work, I think.
Yeah. And did you say the suspect for that became part of the search party as well? So searching for the person
searching for the boy.
that he'd killed.
Yes.
Wow. You just you can't believe the mindset of some people, can you? I mean, there's always a story that surprises me. So what advice would you give to someone considering a career in forensic science today, Greg?
Well, number one, you can't just believe if you're watching CSI or NCIS or Bones. It's not always that glamorous. You may be working a lab, and you have to consider, is pipetting your thing? It's not my thing. I don't like pipetting, but when I started out doing blood alcohol analysis, that's what I had to do. I had to learn how to pipette and pipette accurately. You are going to, you may not be, some people are what they call lab rats. They just want to work in the laboratory. They don't want to go out to the scene. And I can understand that to some extent. Some people are not meant for that. and then the type of work you're going to do. Are you going to be assigned to the sexual assault unit, and are you going to be, scraping through and examining panties and stained clothing and bedding and such? So, again, you just have to have a mindset for it.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think the TV makes it out to be very glamorous, but as you can as you can probably hear from Greg's testimony, it's not all the time. You could be, deep into someone else's pants.
I've
You know?
I've never solved the case in 20 minutes minus commercials.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think going back to the misconception that the public have, you've talked about people debunking the science, but then you have the absolute opposite of people thinking, "Oh, I've got a CSI turning up at my door. It's going to completely be solved, this case. Yay, I'm going to, get all my stuff back that's been taken from my burglary." And I always had that as, that pressure that I would walk into that scene and solve it all for them. And sometimes people would be, very understanding if I walked away without any evidence that's going to identify someone. But some people just wouldn't be able to believe it. They're like, "What do you mean you can't get fingerprints from, this woolen jumper?"
Yes.
you know? So yeah, it can be, yeah, pretty challenging at times. But going back to television, so you've been a consultant for some big shows, like Law and Order, Bones, and Numbers. How did those opportunities first come about for you?
Well, my first opportunity with that was with the television show CSI, Crime Scene Investigations,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
the Vegas episodes or series. And what happened was I was working in my laboratory in Bakersfield, California. And for those of you people who know where Bakersfield is, it's about 120 miles north of Los Angeles, in the southern end of the San Joaquin Valley. It's a oil and agriculture town. We have a lot of itinerant workers, both in the oil industry and the agriculture industry. But I was working in the laboratory reviewing some cases, and I got a phone call from a representative from the American Academy of Forensic Sciences in Colorado Springs. And she says, "Hello, Greg." He goes, "Would you? We have an individual who's with this new TV show, that's new series that's starting, and he would like to talk to you about some of the forensic science techniques, particularly guns and arson and explosives." And I said, "Well," I said, "I understand that, but I really don't like to talk about guns and explosives and arson cases because I don't want people to get any ideas or give them specific information." She goes, "Oh no, nothing, like just general." And I said, "Oh, that's fine." So he says that I hung up the phone and I went back to work, and all of a sudden, about 20 minutes later, the phone rings and I spoke to a very nice gentleman named David Berman, who was an actor on the show, but he was also what they call a researcher for it. And so he called me and I said, "Well, why are you calling me here in Bakersfield?" I said, "You're in Hollywood. You have the Los Angeles Police Department Crime Lab, which was famous under Dragnet." I said, "You have the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Crime Lab. You have the Orange County Crime Lab, which is probably really one of the premier regional crime labs out there." And I said, "Of course, the coroner's office from Quincy." And he goes, "Oh, well, the reason I'm calling you is," he goes, "we're not in Hollywood." I said, "You're not?" He says, "No, no, we're in a town called Santa Clarita, which is about 40, 50 miles north of Hollywood. It's where the Six Flags Magic Mountain is, and our studio's across the street." I said, "Oh, so basically you're calling me because you're in the same area code and you're saving a dime on a long distance phone call." And he goes, "Well, yes, we are." And so it started from there, and then his brother I remember he was at one time an executive vice president for NBC Television, and he gave it up to work on this show, Crime Scene Investigation, which was initiated by a fellow who a writer, television writer, wrote along with one of the CSIs from Las Vegas PD or Metro, and so they came. That show germinated from these ride-alongs and all these stories. And so, because one writer would talk to another writer, it's a very tight-knit community. "Oh, well, you talked to my friend from Bones." Well, then that fellow left CSI to start, work on Bones and then some of these other shows. And then all of a sudden, oh, my buddy from Law and Order, he has a question. Do you mind answering that? So that's how it came
I
about.
see. So yeah, once you got
Just
that foot in the door with CSI Las Vegas, then yeah, your name got spread around.
yeah.
Are there any episodes of CSI Las Vegas where, say, your advice has heavily influenced the storylines?
Oh, I would say almost all the Vegas shows, because I would get the scripts and I would review them. They would send me them, and then on some occasions, when one of their what they call on-site criminalist consultants would be on vacation, I got the nod, so I would work on set, go down to either first at the studios in Santa Clarita, and then later on the whole show moved to Universal Studios, because the actors, the show had become so popular and they were making so much money, the actors didn't want to drive the extra 20, 30 miles. So so they wanted to stay in Hollywood. But I remember one funny story is, and it was supposed to be an arson case episode, and my wife and I were at the local credit union. We were getting a home improvement loan, and I was forewarned ahead of time by my friend. He says, "Oh, we're going to have a guest writer, and this guest writer lives in Hollywood, so the difference is a little bit. Would it be all right if this person calls you?" I said, "Sure, fine." So anyway, I'm going through with the loan officer. We're going through the final stages of our loan, and I get this phone call from this person in Hawaii who wants to talk to me about the arson case and what we do. And so I'm explaining it, and she wants to get an idea of, how to, set the setting and what type of case it's going to be. And I explained how we collect evidence, how we analyze it, and then hung up and finished our loan. Oh, and the loan officer, wanted to hear the conversation, so I had it on speakerphone. She was just
Yeah.
thrilled to death that she was
I bet.
involved in the CSI episode.
A behind the
I
scenes
just wanted my
special.
loan. So anyway, it was a couple of weeks later, I get a phone call from my friend David, and he says, "Oh, your episode's going to be on next week. We're really looking forward to it." And so my wife and I settled down. In fact, we had purchased at that time was an HD TV ready, 60, 55-inch,
Yeah.
television back then. They were boxy and
Yeah.
big, so they took a lot of room in the living room. Anyway, so we settled down and we're going to watch CSI. And I'm looking at this episode and I'm ready to throw my shoe, because it's nothing that I had discussed with the person. And
Yeah.
so I was really mad. I said, That's not what we want. That's not how it was supposed to be." So I get a phone call that Monday morning from David. He goes, "Well, what did you think?" I said, and I'd read the Riot Act. He goes, "Yeah, we got a lot of viewer mail too, saying that, but we have to defer to artistic license on the director's part." So that's what I was told.
Yeah.
So don't blame the consultant.
So yeah, are there occasions where you've won against the writers in a way?
Well, in a way, there was a one episode. It was this lady was the victim was in a coma as a result from an assault and a sexual assault, and the one character, Sarah Seidel, goes with the detective to the hospital, and the lady is lying in the hospital bed, hooked up to the electronics, and she's going to do the sexual assault kit. Now, I explained to them how we do sexual assault kit analysis, as I kind of fancied myself as a forensic gynecologist, because I used to do them on on bodies at the morgue. So,
Someone's got to,
but
haven't they?
but anyway, it's always a good bar talk.
Yeah.
What do you do? I'm a forensic gynecologist.
They probably think you're opening up a joke of some kind, and then they realize you're serious. And then, yeah.
I'm hitting on them. But anyway, in the scene, Sarah Seidel, she pulls out her kit, and of all things she has is a speculum, and the metal device she's going to take a vaginal swab, and what she does is, I couldn't believe it. She raises that speculum to her mouth and huffs on it.
Oh.
She goes, "Oh, I know this is cold. I'm going to warm it up for you." Well, she's gonna collect DNA. Now she's huffed on the speculum. And so again, I said, I said, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" And they go, "Well, it was for, effect. We want to show, that, our criminals are, have feelings and are sensitive to the victims." And I said, "Well, that is just absolute nonsense." And so they said, "Yeah, the viewer mail again." Because they used to have, I guess, their own, little blog series or what,
Mhm.
and I guess the viewer mail got to them, and so they started listening to me. So
That's good.
but it took a season or 2.
But, I mean, what a success that show was because it had, numerous spin-off series, didn't it? It had, plenty of episodes as well, and I think,
Oh,
when you compare it to this day and age where, series just sometimes have, like, 6 to 8 episodes per season, and, they were going for many more
yeah,
episodes, weren't they, per season?
24 to 25 episodes
Yeah.
for a season at in initial days. And, then, of course, it spun off to CSI Miami, then CSI New York. And, if you're gonna ask me about, any crazy cases that I dealt with, I did have a consultation on Miami. They wanted to do an episode of bloodstain pattern analysis in space.
They did not.
I saw the look on your face. And I'm like, Wait a minute." I said, "What yes." He goes, "Well, first of all, one of the questions we have is we have this, millionaire or billionaire, an Elon Musk type or Richard Branson who's going to have these, spaceship trips, for tourist space tourism, and so we're gonna have a homicide occur on one of these spaceships. So, first of all, we wanna know if a person shoots a 9 millimeter firearm in the spaceship and it perforates the hull, will it suck an individual out through the?" I said, "No, the fattest person's probably gonna, clog up the hole, and they'll probably get frostbite on their back." And they said, "Well, how much air would they lose?" And I said, "Well, I don't know how big the spaceship is and what the hole is doing." And I said, "I don't know. I mean, we've never, do that kind of work." And then, "What about bloodstain pattern now?" So I watched a bunch of video of the International, Space Station, where the astronauts are playing with all kinds of liquids, and so I'm watching these little globular bits of liquid or water or whatever they're drinking, and so I watched hours and hours of that stuff, and I basically said, well," I said, "there's very little gravity, so it's all gonna be momentum, and then, of course, it's all gonna affect on what the atmosphere is, if it's a one atmosphere, spaceship, as such." So, but, yeah, they ended up doing a episode of Bloodstain Pattern in space.
So it actually went ahead, that episode, and aired?
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. What would prevent these writers are pretty creative. I mean, they are creative people, and,
Yeah,
it's amazing to watch them work.
yeah,
Put a storyboard together.
yeah, definitely. Because sometimes, yeah, you'll watch a series and you just think, "Where was someone's head when they came up with such a far-fetched but yet interesting idea?" And I think that's what kept CSI so successful is that, you've got the forensic science, the intrigue of that, but yet you've got a different case every single time. And I think
Well,
that was
they had real casework to work with.
yeah,
They would cull the newspapers and such to see, what, and then, for me, it was almost every week. I had, 2 or 3, little sub stories where, I'm trying to solve the perfect crime, and explain, no, there are no ice bullets, there are no frozen meat bullets, and that type of thing.
yeah. But I think it was probably one of the first TV shows that I ever watched that you would have an episode that starts and finishes. So you'd have that kind of, you could just pick up one and watch just one. If one came on television, you would not feel like you've missed anything beforehand. But yet you would still have these subplots in the background
It,
that, if you watch it in order, then it's kind of, so you've kind of got that storytelling that I just thought at the time was just like fantastic, really.
and then you had to deal with Sweep Sweep because, it was a Jerry Bruckheimer production. So sweeps week, you always had to have a fire and an explosion of some sort. So,
Did you meet people such as, cast, crew, people like that?
yes. As a matter of fact, the first week, actually, I got involved right after the pilot episode. So we were invited, my wife and I and my son were invited down to the studio there in Santa Clarita. And so we got to meet the cast and crew. And then later on, as I worked through the series and sometimes then worked on set as a consultant, I would meet them. And then there was always what we call the Christmas party and then the end of the year wrap party. And so they would introduce us. And then my wife and I were invited one day down to the Los Angeles Television Arts and Sciences, and they had a meet the real CSI. So they had some of the us consultants invited, and so we had a dinner and everything, and then
Yeah,
and a showing. So yeah, it was kind of fun.
yeah,
Yeah, she and my wife have always enjoyed. It was a good excuse to get her hair done, nails done, new shoes, new dress.
yeah. They don't need
And
an
then
excuse,
being
really,
put
do
up
they?
at a posh hotel, having
Yeah.
having no parking, valet parking and such.
So, if you could have a character represent you, which one would it have been from any of the CSI shows?
Oh, it would have been Grissom,
Yeah,
Gil Grissom from the original CSI. Because one of the things, and I don't know if they borrowed it from me, but I am an avid crossword puzzle
yeah,
uh, worker, and in the break room when I was at work, I would finish other people's crosswords to their dismay. But yeah,
Oh, interesting. I wonder if they did kind of pitch that from you.
I just don't know. I'd like to think
Yeah,
they did, but
yeah,
it
yeah.
may
And
not have been.
he was
Like I
always
said,
into.
those writers are creative.
They are, aren't they? But he was always into entomology, wasn't he? There's the study of
Ye
bugs, and he would
Yes.
collect a great deal of them, wouldn't he? Is there anything that you have been kind of obsessive like that by? I know you've got your interest in bloodstain pattern analysis, firearms.
Well, it's kind of interesting because one thing was for me, it was amassing a library of training manuals, books of all types of forensic science books and issues and articles. And so I think what served me well with CSI because they would call me up and say, we have this and that. And I was able to, within 20 minutes, respond back to them. And they were just always amazed that I was this, some kind of genius. But it's just that I had all my
Yeah.
reference collection of tests and such that right
Yeah.
at my fingertips. Very, very rarely they called me. It was usually via email. So I saved
Yeah.
all my old emails and some of the questions and plots, and then of course they would send me the scripts and then I would,
Yeah.
what would a criminalist say in this, in these, and so I always had to have, if you ever notice sometimes in the early parts of the show, there was always the scene and then the criminalist walks in and says something quirky. Well,
Yeah.
those are the little asides or something that I inserted into the television show.
Greg, so now you are president of Criminalistics Services International. So what kind of services do you offer to people?
Well, I'm retired from that now,
I
last
see.
year or 2 years ago, but, every so often I still get phone calls from attorneys, "Oh, please, can you look at this?" Or, "I got your name." But at this stage and age and trying to get my golf, score under 80, and my wife is now retired, and we just wanna travel and do these things,
Yeah.
visit the world. So Criminalistics Services International is just something that goes on a name tag when I attend a professional meeting.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. But if anyone does contact you for advice on, say, TV shows and things like that, do you still do that, or have you retired that as well?
Oh, I'll talk to them. I'll provide,
Yeah.
if it's just easy advice, but I won't be doing casework.
No, no. That's probably the answer that your wife wants to hear as well, because then she's got an excuse to buy another pair of shoes, isn't she?
Exactly.
Oh, Greg,
Exactly.
it's been a real pleasure not just learning about, like your TV career and things like that and the advice that you've given there, but also about how, you've grown up with forensic science as in its key evolution period, I feel. So yeah, it's been really, really fascinating. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure. And maybe we can do this again sometime.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think I'll have to watch CSI, watch a few episodes and be like, right, Greg,
There,
what happened
there
here?
you go. It's probably on Oxygen Network or what have you.
Oh dear. But yeah, thank you very much to all the listeners that have listened. I hope you've enjoyed that episode as much as I have. And yeah, take care and I'll see you on the next one.
The night folds over the city like a trench coat collar turned up against the rain. And somewhere out there, another story is already bleeding through the cracks. If you want to keep riding shotgun with us, subscribe to The Evidence Trail wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to spot beyond the flashing blue lights, join our Patreon. Subscribers get exclusive episodes, early access drops, and case files the rest of the world won't hear until the smoke clears. And when the mic goes silent, find us at Evidence Trail on social media. Until next time, stay curious. In a city like this, evidence is like a ghost in the fog. And if you're a crook walking the evidence trail, watch where you step.